Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I am back with another emergency card video. Last week we came out with kit number 11 and this is the favorites kit. So there are 2 full pages of sentiments that are really kind of all occasions and the ones you guys requested most. I will link to the video where we go through the kit in detail. But for this video, we're really focusing on these 3 extra sets of measurements that we're using to step up this card sketch. Because there's so much additional detail for this video, I am going to link the entire emergency card kit again, and I will include instructions later on how you can get that download for free. This dark teal piece of cardstock is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That's the gray matte layer. Then we have the trifold card base. It is 11 inches wide by 5 1/2 inches tall. Then I am going to score this. So I'm scoring at 1 1/2 and then again at 3 3/4 of an inch. If I had my larger scoreboard out, I would then score at 7 5/8, but I didn't want to do that. So instead, I'm going to go to that second score line, the 3 3/4. I'm going to fold on that line and just tuck the flap behind it. Then I will score at 3 7/8. Okay, so that's all the scoring for our card. And again, those measurements are on the printable for you. So I am just going to fold all of these going the same direction. They're kind of folding into the card. Okay, we are creating not just a card, but a gift card holder. This design, this sort of trifold design works really, really well for that. You can see as I'm unfolding it, I have that longer flap on the left. That'll be the front of our card. And then here I have 2 sort of short flaps. And if I fold one up, I can tuck the gift card in there and it will fit just perfectly before that score line. So there's no risk of it falling out. And I really, really love how well this fits in here. So I've unfolded both of those and I'm just holding the gift card on that shortest flap, the one on the edge, and I'm using a pencil to kind of show you where I'm going to add my glue. Okay, I don't want to go all the way up against that gift card, or in my case, a hotel key, but you know, I want to get close. I don't want it wiggling around in there. I don't want to risk it falling out or getting lost or anything like that. Once I've added my glue, I will fold on that 1 1/2 inch score line and press that firmly against the other section. And you can see how well that gift card just tucks right in there. I'm going to take it back out while we're making everything else. Make sure I give that glue plenty of time to dry before I mess with it too much. There are measurements on there if you wanted to add some pattern paper to that short section where the gift card pocket is. That one is the pink patterned paper, but I'm skipping that one. Then here I am adding a little strip. This is from scrapbook.com. It's the Slimline Borders die set. And I used this in the last emergency card stepped up video, right, for that mermaid card. So I'm like, well, if we're going to buy it, we're going to use it. And I just wanted a little decorative piece here on the front flap of my card. So I glued that right to the edge. And then I have this black piece. That's the purple pattern paper. It's 3 3/8 by 5 1/2. Again, all of these measurements are on the printable, but use what you have, right? You don't have to add that scallop border. You could add a different border. You could just add pattern paper on the white section. Make this your own. I want to know what you do. So if you make any of these cards or any emergency cards, tag me at Sassy's LLC. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube. I want to see what you make. So here I have this gold matte layer is 3 by 5 1/2 and the polka dot paper is 2 3/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm just layering that on there so that I have 2 strips of gold peeking out of either side. And then I will center that onto the black section of my card. You guys, I love polka dots. I love polka dots so much and I haven't used them in a while. So I was really excited about this one. Then I'm adding my 2-inch circle for my matte layer for my sentiment. And you could leave the card like that, but I am going to put the whole thing on that A2 piece of teal cardstock, dark teal cardstock. And that gives me a strip of teal on either side. It makes the card a complete A2 size, but you could skip that piece, right? It doesn't have to be a full A2. I'm pulling out Emergency Kit 11 and I'm punching out a happy birthday with my 1 3/4 inch punch, and I will temporarily adhere that to my card so that if I want to change that sentiment later, it's really easy to do so. And then I have my tri-fold gift card holder complete. I am so excited about this card. We are making an envelope card, but it's an A2 size, so it will fit in a standard A2 envelope. Okay, so this piece of white cardstock is 11 inches by 5.5, just like before. And we're gonna score this at 1 inch, again at 3.5 inches. And again, I don't have my long scoreboard. The next one should be at 7 3/4 inches, but instead I'm gonna fold on that second score line, tuck it underneath and score at 4 1/4. So the middle section is A2. It's 4 1/4 by 5.5. I'm mountain folding all of those, and it's going to look a lot like the last card. It's just that the score lines and then the measurements of the sections are slightly different. To make this look like an envelope, I'm going to open this up. This is that front flap, and I am going to make a mark in the middle of that flap at 2 3/4 inches. So I'm just using my grid mat to help me find that. And then I'm going to score at the top and the bottom 1 inch in from the edge. And you have a diagram there at the top left that kind of shows you how we're going to cut all of that. Okay, so the measurements are there, the diagram is there. And then I'm just going to bring this into my trimmer, and I am cutting from that middle point to the 1 inch mark that we made on the top and bottom. I had it in my head that I really wanted rounded corners for this envelope, but you could absolutely skip it. I took my time on the card base because we're going to create some extra layers. We're going to create a magnetic flap. You can skip the magnet. I'll explain that. But as I'm creating the other layers, once I have the first part rounded, the others are really, really simple to just sort of follow along that curve and make that fit really nicely. I probably could have used my scissors to trim this lavender piece so that it would match, right? So that pattern paper is listed as the purple pattern paper, 3 1/4 by 5.5. And I just used my trimmer then to match up the cut lines that go to that center point, and then I'll use my scissors to match the rounding. I'm using my temporary adhesive. It's the same piece or the same adhesive that I use when I'm adding my sentiments. It just helps hold everything in place while I'm doing my cutting. I also have a piece of 120-pound heavyweight cardstock where I did the same thing. That's because we're adding the magnet. I'm going to run the lavender piece through this Flower Frenzy embossing folder from Spellbinders. It's a 3D folder, and it's absolutely beautiful. That's going to be the decorative element for the flap of our envelope. Next, we have 2 wafer thin magnets from Total Element. These are so thin. I'll link them below. I love a magnetic closure on cards. There's something really crisp and clean and awesome about it. If you don't want to use magnets, skip the magnet part, okay? There's one other piece you're going to skip, but otherwise just follow all the folding and gluing and it'll work out beautifully, okay? So I am adding glue all over that short flap that we used as the gift card pocket on the last one, okay? And then I'm going to take one of my magnets, and I'm guessing here and it's wrong. So what I'm going to find out is that ultimately I want my magnet on that glue flap. Here, we're going to open it back up again because I'm like, oops. I want that magnet as close to the edge as I can get it, and I want it centered. So I'm using my grid mat here to kind of center it up, but I want to make sure it's completely enclosed. I have small children. I don't want those magnets falling out or floating around. Okay, so I'm going to press that firmly. I have it now essentially as far down as it can go, right? So I'm kind of putting the other magnet on top. It's grabbing the one behind, okay, and it's completely enclosed. I'm going to put this white piece, this is my 120-pound accent opaque, and I'm going to put that on top and put the magnet there and use a pencil to just kind of draw around it for placement. If you're skipping the magnet, skip the white piece. Okay, you don't need that at all if you aren't adding the magnet. It's about the same thickness as the magnet. That's how thin they are. I'm just using a standard hole punch, and that magnet is gonna fit perfectly in there. You guys, it's like magic. If I didn't have an embossed panel on the top, I might use 2 layers of that heavyweight cardstock if I wanted it really, really smooth. But with the embossing, the tiny little extra thickness, you will never notice. So here's what I found out as I'm checking my placement. That embossing folder is so rich with detail that my purple piece shrunk. It shrunk. It's slightly narrower than the other pieces. So I just took that white piece with the hole in it and our card base into my trimmer and just cut tiny little slivers off the side so I didn't have to redo everything. Check your embossing folder, or maybe make that piece a little bit bigger first and then trim it down after you emboss it. I am adding my heavyweight white cardstock with the hole in it to the flap of my envelope. I'm just using my glue so I can wiggle it and get it perfectly in place. And then I'm going to take my scissors. I have to sort of re-round my corners now because I trimmed everything down. It's fine. It's going to be fine, right? Here's my magnet, and I press and I wiggle and I just kind of make sure that it fits all the way down in there. And I'm going to hold this up for you so you can see how great this is. It is a tight fit in there, but look at that. It's ever so slightly thicker. Next, I am adding my Beacon 3-in-1. This is going to add some strength and stability to the flap, but it also is going to make sure I've got a little bit of wiggle room, and when it dries, it is not going anywhere. There is no way that magnet is falling out. Not a chance. Okay. So I'm going to get my little embossed panel onto that flap, and it's so beautiful, and it was so easy, right? Next, I want to decorate this sort of inside flap. It's going to be a pocket eventually of my envelope. I have a whole bunch of these flowers. It's from the Ultimate Fabulous Florets, and I stamped a gazillion of them and couldn't figure out why I kept getting that little white spot where the ink didn't transfer. I had a bubble under my stamp, and I think I made like 10 of them before I figured out what was going wrong. And I've kept them in my stash because I don't throw anything away. And I was like, you know what? This is a pretty narrow area. I bet I can use them, and just end up trimming off the part with that little white empty space. You guys, I was so mad. I was like, what am I doing wrong? It was just an air bubble. You live and you learn, right? Have you guys tried layered stamping? I've been doing a lot of it lately and have learned some things, and would be happy to do like a tips and tricks video for layered stamping if you're interested. It's just a really easy way to kind of mass produce things. Stenciling, similarly, I think stenciling is sometimes easier, except that in the end, if you're making a bunch of something, I think the stenciling takes longer, even though it does a better job of letting you add shading and layers of dimension and things like that. So I'm curious, do you like layered stamping? Have you tried layered stenciling? Let me know in the comments below. Meanwhile, I am just gluing away, right? I'm adding all my little pieces. I'm tucking leaves underneath. There are only 2 leaves, or at least I only stamped 2 shapes of leaves. So I'm looking for ways to make it look like it's not the same leaf over and over and over again. Before I have it completely covered, I'm going to pick it up and kind of trim around the edges. I find that my scissors are the easiest way to do this. And then I was kind of hoping I'd be able to use one of those edges that I trimmed off to fill in the gap. Like there I am. I'm grabbing that one little flower, completely forgetting that it has a white hole in it. You guys, do you have these days when you're creating and you're like, oh yes, I have a plan. I am like the master of all card makers. And then you do something that you're just shaking your head at it later. So I'm grabbing another flower from the pile, a brand new one. It's fine. And I'll glue that into that little empty space. And then I'm going to add one more leaf just to kind of fill everything in. I felt like I was being brave here, but at the same time, I was like, most of these flowers were unusable anyway. So if it doesn't go well, it's fine. I cannot believe I made this. Like I am obsessed with how this turned out. They just, I don't even know. I know I have these little moments on a lot of cards, but sometimes I surprise myself, and I did it here. So we're going to make a little card to go in the pocket. I have a purple piece that's 4 3/4 by 3.5. And then I'm going to use my double stitched rectangle from Cat Scrappiness. Ultimately, I'm just cutting a rectangle that is 4 1/4 by 3 inches, but I really like the stitched detail. I feel like it gives it kind of a finished look in the end. And I'm going to go ahead and glue the white piece onto the lavender piece. When I go to glue this shut, right, I want that card to fit right in the pocket, and I'm going to put my glue all the way at the edge. I was a little bit heavy-handed, so my glue oozes. Later on, off camera, I ended up cutting just a little sliver off of all of the edges of that purple piece because I was having a hard time getting it in and out of the pocket without having to really tug on it. So just be really careful with your glue, or you can cut it down a little bit narrower. If I was going to add a circle sentiment, I would probably add it to the inside of the flap, but in the end, I chose not to, right? It's an emergency card without an emergency card sentiment. I'm all right with it. I was really happy with how that turned out. For our last card, we are going to create this glittering purse card. If you are one of my craft roulette friends, let me know in the comments below. I was like, oh my gosh, here it comes again. I don't set out to do this. I just end up with lots of purse cards. So this black piece, again, is going to be 11 inches by 5.5 inches, and we're going to score it a little differently again. We're going to score the first time at 3 7/8 of an inch. And then if I had a larger scoreboard, it would be 7 7/8. But I'm instead going to fold that and then score at 4 inches. Okay, so the middle section of this card is going to be 4 by 5.5. I'm going to use my bone folder and press these firmly. If you wanted to, you could create the same magnetic closures for this one as we did for the last one. So this piece of cardstock is my pink patterned paper. It's going to be for that inside flap. And it measures 3 7/8 by 5.5. And I'm using the Geoscreens embossing folder from Spellbinders. It's a 2D folder, and it's like my go-to for fancy things. I love it. I don't know. I just do. I'm going to shellac that on there with my Beacon 3-in-1. If you want a magnetic closure, add a second piece of black cardstock of the same size, punch a hole in it for the magnet, and sandwich it between the card base and that embossed panel, right? And you can line it up kind of the same way we did with the last one. It might be easier to do the front flap first. So here I have a piece of gold glitter paper that is my purple pattern paper. So it's 3 1/8 by 5.5. And again, if you want the magnet, you're just going to have a second piece of heavyweight cardstock in between with a hole in it for your magnet. I'm trimming off a little extra because my black cardstock's from Michael's, and you know what, guys? It's not quite 11 inches, and it's driving me nuts. It's okay. We'll just trim it off. All right, we're going to make this sort of off-center point. So just like before, I'm going to line this up on my grid mat and mark 1 inch from the edge at the top and bottom. That's on my glitter flap. And then 1.5 inches from one side. It doesn't really matter which side, but I like it on the side that it's on, right? So when we're looking at it per style, the shorter edge is going to be on the left because I want to add a little strip sentiment to this, and I think that works better going up the right. I don't know, maybe that's just me. For my sentiment, we are going to be using a PhotoPlay set. There's a whole bunch of these. This one is just called Birthday, right? They don't have tons of stamp sets, but a handful of them are like this, where they have like one big sentiment and then they have a bunch of little like strip sentiments that go with it. And I love this one. It says, "Another year looks good on you." So I am using my anti-static powder tool, and then I will stamp that in some Versamark ink. And I'm adding some Brutus Monroe Gilded embossing powder. Do you see it sort of flying up? That's my air conditioning. You guys, I don't know what to do. I need air conditioning, but my embossing powder is going everywhere these days. I feel like it didn't used to do that. I don't know. Anyway, I heat set that. And then there are these sentiment strip etched metal dies from PhotoPlay. I'll link everything I use below. But I am going to cut that out with one of those dies. It just fits. And I love that. I don't want a whole lot of extra going on there. And I'm going to put that right along the edge of my purse. So I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive just because I feel like it grabs on a little better, a little more quickly on glitter cardstock. This is a no shed glitter cardstock, again, from Michaels. I get almost all of my glitter cardstock from Michaels these days because I want to use it all the time. So I need it to not cost $1 million. And it doesn't shed. It just doesn't. I love it. I'm not sure if I want a circle sentiment on this one. So I've temporarily adhered that sort of 2-inch circle mat. That's where I would put it if I was going to add one. And then I've punched out another birthday sentiment, the big birthday wishes. You could do any color here, but I kind of liked that teal with the gold. And then that is just, you know, a really simple purse card. If you were using a lighter color of cardstock, you wouldn't need to do anything on the inside. But I thought it might be easier to add like a little white piece in there. So this is 5 1/4 by 3 3/4, and it's just going to add that little sort of edge of black around the outside. We're going to take one more look at all 3 cards. I would love to know which one is your favorite. If you're interested in the free printable that has all of the measurements and diagrams for these 3 cards, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. And then click more or show more below the video to unpack the description box. You'll find all of the supplies that I've used. And then down at the very bottom, you'll find links to both kits, one with American spelling and one with Australian and British spelling. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you next time.